I want to officially welcome you to Taylor High. I have worked as the principal here for almost 5 years and believe it is a top-notch facility. I see from your resume that even though your name is Jeremy, you prefer to be called Pete. Is it all right that I call you Pete?
Yes. I have always gone by Pete, both professionally and personally. I would feel more comfortable if you would address me as such.
Well, Pete, I have heard that you have quite a reputation as a teacher. Congratulations on your National Board certification. This is quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. I believe teaching is one of the hardest yet most noble professions a person can undertake. I have cherished the opportunity to work with students in the classroom.
If you enjoy classroom teaching so much, why are you applying for an associate principal position? To be honest, it doesn't look like you really have much practical experience developing school reform models and school policy. Don't you think these are the types of things you will need to do to increase student achievement?
I don't believe I need to be an expert on policy issues or a genius when it comes to school reform models in order to improve student learning at Taylor High. An abundance of research informs us that direct factors such as teachers' ability to motivate students, create reliable assessments, and the use of continual formative assessment techniques make bigger impacts on student learning and whole school reform. The real key to improving student learning lies in the classroom with teachers. If you hired me, you were getting first and foremost an instructional leader who looks forward to cultivate a school environment that fosters the professional growth of every teacher.
Easier said than done. How exactly will you create a school environment that cultivates teachers into becoming more reflective practitioners?
I think the most important thing I can do is to establish relationships with teachers to let them know that I will be a continual presence in their classroom but not to judge their work, rather to become a student of their instructional practices. I feel like this is the only way I will be able to both help them think more deeply about their instructional choices.
I am not sure what you mean by being a student of their instruction. It sounds like you are implying that your job is to be more of a formative coach than simply to evaluate their work as a whole. How exactly would you develop such a relationship given the fact that most teachers see administrators as just judging their work?
More than anything, I would just make sure to keep in touch with them. If I was to pop into their classes for even 10 to 15 minutes on a given day, I would immediately make comments to them and pose questions as to my observations of student engagement. During my internship, I learned to use Google Docs to facilitate such ongoing conversations. It worked well in most cases, and I feel like it would also work at Taylor High.
Your role here would be more than just formatively observing teachers. You're just one person with limited ideas. What we really need is for teachers to work together.
I couldn't agree more. It can be hard though for teachers to find time to work together. I think that one thing we could do is to look deeply at how teachers are scheduled to build common planning times for them to collaborate. As well, I would propose that rather than have sit-and-get meetings, we could better utilize such contracted time to have teachers work in professional learning communities.
Are you proposing that teachers should be learning from one another? This is quite a bit different than the training we currently do. We usually pay someone from the outside to come in and put on seminars for our staff. Given budget cuts though, this is getting hard to do.
I believe that most of the knowledge we need to improve student learning at Taylor High School is already found in the staff. By having them work in communities focused on analyzing assessment data and how it relates to instruction, I believe teachers can learn to think more deeply about how they formulate and conduct lessons. Just last year I had a chance to run a video club as a teacher leader. We all videotaped each other during the term and then would sit down and analyze them for evidence of student learning. Although it felt a little awkward at first, everyone involved learned a great deal.
Interesting. I see from your resume that you have quite a bit of experience bringing Web 2.0 technologies into your classroom. I am not real fond of this whole social networking, blogging, texting craze. Do you really feel like this type of learning has a place in school?
Absolutely. The world of students at Taylor High is much more global than ever before. They will compete in job markets that require them to be experts at navigating, sorting through, and creating personal meaning from the abundance of information on the internet. Things like cell phones, Twitter, Google, YouTube and Facebook shouldn't be seen as enemies to the school world that we live in. These are the things that students learn from outside of school. If we don't harness their power in school, there will be too big of a disconnect between their school world and the real world. I feel that they will become too disengaged to learn anything at school.
I disagree. Are you saying we should allow kids to use cell phones and smartphones in class?
Yes. Kids are using these things anyway. It seems like most schools spend a lot of time fighting it. The fact is, many kids have these devices that can be instructionally quite useful. For example, when watching video clips, I know some teachers who have kids text in comments and questions to the teacher monitor. As well, Twitter is a free way to personalize announcements for students. Why should we waste time on an intercom with announcements when only half of them listen anyway? I feel like by teaching kids how to properly use these devices as well as when it is appropriate to use them, we are in fact teaching them the 21st century skills they need. I mean, aren't there some adults you know who could learn from such lessons as well?
Interesting point. I suppose one of my frustrations with technology is that it just progresses so fast. My teachers are all over the place in terms of knowing how to use it. How would you propose we train teachers to be more 21st century tech savvy?
I believe a train-the-trainer mentor type model would work well. We could set up teachers into small technology communities, matching up those who struggle with those who are more efficient. In this way, they could help one another. As new technologies become available, we can pay to have some teachers trained who would then bring it back to the school. This would be much more cost-effective than sending our whole staff to an outside training that might be obsolete in 2 years.
These sound like good ideas. Switching gears a little bit, we just conducted our first equity audit. Even though we are known as a high-achieving school, the data shows quite a bit of inequality between our white middle-class students and students labeled with special needs. As well, our minority students and economically disadvantaged students are not doing very well. Do you have any ideas on how we could improve student achievement to be more equitable?
I do. I believe the key lies in developing the capacity of all teachers to teach all students. Too many times it seems like school systems separate labeled students from the majority. There is little evidence that this leads to greater student learning. We should be utilizing our resources better to build teacher capacity. It is a lot cheaper to have our special education teachers help other teachers learn techniques for working with students with special needs than to constantly be worried about providing a personalized room for any student with a particular issue. In reality, all students are unique learners, even the ones who aren't labeled.
In recent years we have been making steps to do just that. We have been loading many of our labeled students into particular general ed classes to keep them together.
This is not a good approach. In order to build teacher capacity, the proportion of students labeled with a disability should be equivalent to the proportion they are to the school body as a whole. Loading a few classes, with a majority of all special ed students, is not good for anyone. It asks too much of the teacher, and likely won't help the students much.
This makes sense. I was wondering why those teachers quit last year. This really doesn't do much for helping out economically disadvantaged students or the minority students at our school. Do you have any ideas to help them?
A key first step would be to get teachers talking about the reasons they believe that these students aren't doing well. This might call for some critical conversations to occur. I believe all teachers want all students to learn, but sometimes unintentionally utilize instructional practices that are not culturally relevant. For example, if our U.S. history class spends a month on the Revolution and Civil War, but only one day discussing the impact of the civil rights movement, many minority students might feel disillusioned with school. I once met a history teacher who spent roughly 5 minutes talking about Hugo Chavez but days on George Washington, even though 80% of the student body was Latino. He was clueless as to why so many students were failing his class.
Pete, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. I feel like you have some good ideas. I look forward to speaking with you more in a larger interview. There are other people around here who would love to discuss some of these issues in more depth.